we show up to these calls, we have all that first impression nailed, and we are being authentic. And then we build that rapport, we set the agenda, we do the intros, and then we focus on the actual conversation. And that conversation, when I talk about the human element, I'm not talking about fluff. I'm talking about taking an outside-in perspective where you're having a business level conversation that your buyers care about. Because if we show up and throw up product, that is not the way to connect to the other person and show them that we are investing in you and learning about you and helping you achieve your objectives or address a problem that you're having.
You're listening to the Sales Today podcast, and I'm your host, Fred Copestake. On this podcast, we explore how sales professionals can develop a modern approach to winning business, the application of virtual selling techniques, how to create meaningful business relationships, and much more. Why not take our free collaborative selling scorecard to see how your sales approach suits today's environment? You'll find a link in the show notes. And welcome to this episode of the Sales Today podcast, where I'm delighted to be joined by Rana Salman, who is CEO of Solman Consulting and also author of a cracking book that I've just got here next to me, Sales Essentials. So Rana, welcome.
Thank you for having me, Fred. I'm super excited. I look forward to having a sales essentials conversation.
Well, yeah, and that's exactly where I want to go. When I got the book, thank you for sending it me. It made me a little bit sentimental. It really did. Because when I first started in the sales training world, 20-something years ago, I ran a course called Selling the Essentials for Success, which was kind of the basic course that kind of any salesperson would come on. 3-day residential, all different industries. I mean, load of fun. And I saw the book, saw the title. I thought, wow, it took me right back. So what I'd like to do is just discuss those sales essentials, those kind of basics, almost like that any salesperson, any industry, anyone getting into this world would need to be understanding and how they apply it.
Yeah. I think going back to the fundamentals and reminding ourselves that sales is about people, especially when B2B selling. And when you take the human element out of it, you fail. And so there are fundamentals and essentials to influence a behavior, because at the end of the day, sales is about influence. You can have an idea that you're trying to sell to your boss. You can have a job that you're trying to influence or persuade someone that you are the one to hire. There's fundamentals that we need to do. And you can be selling a very complex solution. And Fred, the way I look at it is there are fundamental things that you need to do before, during, and after the sale. Before the sale is number one, you got to know your product, right? I'm not saying you got to lead with your product, but I've been in selling for close to 20 years, and I will not talk about anything in my product or even have a conversation about the value if I don't know fundamentals on it. So knowing our product as well as continuously prospecting. This is something where some reps are doing great this quarter, but if you're not the essentials of it consistently prospecting and building that pipeline, it will starve. Another thing is preparation, right? I know, and I know we cringe because we've been in sales, we are in sales, and someone says, do your homework. But the reality of it is that's the essential to doing our homework and prepare in that way. When we're in front of our buyers, we are conducting a business level conversation. We're taking an outside perspective. And
so let me just, I need to jump in on prep. Because just you saying that, I mean, of course, yeah, knowing the product, prospecting, absolutely. But this prep one, I don't know why my memory's doing really weird things today. It's just, you made me think of what another podcast guest said. He said, if you don't do your prep, you're being discourteous and dishonest. That's pretty strong language. But what he's saying is if you're turning up and you're not able to make the most of your time and that other person's time, that's really not a very good thing.
It's not. And I always tell the reps, as a rep myself, I also believe it, that discovery is a gift. And when you land that meeting, it is you have to be very respectful of someone else's. And to do that and to optimize the time that you have with a person, you got to do a little bit of work. Now, when you and I started selling, many, many years ago, we didn't have the efficiencies. We didn't have LinkedIn just started. And even before, I didn't use LinkedIn because it wasn't available as it is now to use it for social selling. But we didn't have, it wasn't efficient. Now there's so much efficiencies that our buyers, of course, expect us to at least look at their LinkedIn profile, to at least connect the dots. And I love there's a quote by Mark Cuban where he said, "The way to ask your question will help me determine if you prepare for these conversations." And while we always say there are no stupid questions, if you ask a question where, man, if you just look at the person's LinkedIn profile, you're almost disqualifying yourself. So that platform also helps you build credibility. And especially when you start selling up to VPs, SVPs, and C-suite, when you start the conversation by saying, look, I noticed, for example, in your earnings call transcript that you X, Y, and Z, tell me more. Wow, how the conversation changed you, right?
Oh, totally. I mean, I was smiling when you were talking about, LinkedIn wasn't kind of really around. That training course I spoke about, we were talking about how you could use the internet to research. Oh, that's how long ago it was. That's, this is what you can be. And everyone just probably listening to that is now laughing. And okay, I'm going to put one back you then. If you're not using Chat GPT, you are already, I mean, it's less, a year old, say. I mean, you're doing yourself a massive disservice there, aren't you? I mean, you are wasting your own time, essentially.
Yeah, it's using these tools without losing your voice, right? And so using them for efficiencies, but also making sure that you're not sounding like everyone. And that's where I look at ChatGPT. I look at a tool called Perplexity. There's also another tool. I look at them as my assistant. So I will be the one, the voice. I am in control. I am the human because they're going to buy from me. And if I sound like everyone else, we're not going to be unique, right? So how can I leverage that tool for efficiencies, but without losing my uniqueness? There's an art and science for sales. And the science is we talk about it in the book. We talk about some of that. There's also an art that we talk about, and that is you as a human being, the uniqueness of not forgetting that even turning that webcam on and showing that face, that is a competitive differentiator. And so that's where the art and the sale need to come in. And we need to make sure that we were using these tools. I absolutely agree. You got to use these tools, but make sure you're not losing your voice.
But augment is another way I would describe that. Augment yourself, bring them in to make you better, but it's got to be you, hasn't it? There are no stupid questions. Well, actually, there are. Is what we're saying. Because if you could have found it out, it's
not to be disrespectful, but again, I've been on calls where if the research is out there and it's right in front of you, right? And you ask a question where your buyers are thinking, well, if you just Google my name, if you look at my LinkedIn profile, it's right there. That could impact your credibility. And that's what I loved about the Mark Cuban quote. It was like, it absolutely does. Another thing, Fred, that I would also talk about when we talk about the essentials, and this may sound fluff to people, but that first impression matters. Research shows us that it takes anywhere between, I've read it 1/10 of a second to 7 seconds for someone to form a first impression. And so how you show up does matter, right? Do you have an agenda? But your attire, artificial communication, we call it, the way you show up matters. And people are communicating to your audience and they're interpreting that message. Another thing is, are you early on these calls? Are you testing everything? What about your attitude? Research from several research bodies have noted that positive attitudes invites positive results. Negative attitudes invites negative results. Attitude impacts your performance. It influences the other people's behavior. It's contagious. So how are you showing up to these calls, right? Those are essentials. And I think sometimes we think they're fluff, but the reality of it, when you're selling to a human, doesn't matter. How do you show up to these meetings?
What was that little expression you used? Artificial communication.
Yeah.
Okay.
So artificial communication is our attire, it's our hair, it's our jewelry. I say in the book, authenticity is awesome. But at the end of the day, we are meeting with a budget holder. And if we're showing up like we're rolling out of bed or we're in our gym attire and going to the gym, the buyer is looking at us and saying, wow, I'm not important enough for them to really just put a business professional shirt on. Those things matter. And I always tell folks that I train is we got to manage our authenticity as we owe it to our buyers to show up.
Oh, manage your authenticity. Yeah. Oh no, I like that. I like that a lot. I mean, not a week will go by on LinkedIn where there's not some kind of discussion around, yeah, well, I should be allowed to turn up as I want and be me. Okay, if that's what you think, crack on. Good luck to you. But don't come running to us when you're not successful, because we can tell you exactly what is going on. Well, not exactly, but the way people work, the way we think. And these things do matter.
If people are trusting you with a big budget and you're not showing up organized, prepared, ready to go, they're thinking, man, I haven't even paid them. What happens when I pay them, right? They got the PO. Are they? So all of that, those impressions. And another essential that I would say is,
sorry to interrupt you. Oh, terrible. Don't interrupt people. You're going to go to that, aren't you? During the meeting, you'll be like, yeah, then let people speak. That first impressions though, again, I'm thinking back to what I used to do. But now I'm saying to people make their first impressions before they meet you, which is what you're saying with the agenda. We've mentioned LinkedIn a couple of times, all of that kind of stuff. They're already starting to build this idea of what you're like and what you're all about, aren't they? So we need to manage that.
Great when you mentioned LinkedIn. Absolutely. Right. People are learning about us before we even show up. And while people are buying, your solutions from your company, they're buying you, right? They care about who they're associating with. And so looking at your LinkedIn profile, ask yourself, how am I optimizing the profile to be client facing, to my buyer personas? Because what I want to be is I want to be relatable, right? And you talk about yourself, Fred, about trust, forming high trust relationships. And high trust relationship is about factors like competency and your character. And you start developing that competency through the way you show up in a digital platform. And what you also want to do, and especially the younger generation, I do guest speak at colleges, and I talk about the importance of auditing your digital footprint. Because when you're in college, you may be posting something that you don't want your future employer or customer to see. And so Googling yourself and making it regularly and seeing what's out there and making sure that you're aligning your brand to your professional strengths and capabilities is also important, because that's absolutely an impression that you're forming. It's very easy for people to Google you, find information about. And as you grow in your career, you want to make sure it aligns with that professional strengths and capabilities, and also being a human. Like you don't want to. You notice on my LinkedIn, I share with you something that is personal. I share with you about my running. I share with you about my lessons that I learned in sales. You don't want to also forget about the human aspect, but you also want to make sure that anything you're sharing, there's a value add to your audience. How is it connected to goals, to your topic, your objectives?
Yeah. So I was smiling when you were talking about auditing the digital footprint, because as we record this, as a mate of mine from uni on the way, old uni mate on the way to visit me, and I know in the conversation we'll be saying, "God, so good. We did have mobile phones back in the day." It's excellent. There were like photos being taken and some of the stuff we got up to.
You are lucky, right? Our next generation
Yeah.
is out. And we need to help them recognize that how we post on Instagram is a little different than how we post on a professional business network.
But that said, I mean, that's kind of being a bit silly, but that thing on LinkedIn where you're saying, share a little bit about yourself, the you outside of work, the Saturday post, if you like, it doesn't just have to be on a Saturday, it could be on a Monday. People like that. And actually they get the best engagement as well.
Absolutely, they do, right? And this is where you can't take the human out of and sound like a robot, right? Like even if you're posting something about your company or solution or product launch, how is it unique? What is that? How are you unique? How is it different than other posts? And also being human, there's an element of people connecting to you and relating to you. Because in complex deals, you got to build rapport. I mean, this is part of the sales process, right? And if you go directly to that business level conversation, you miss on that empathy, on that connection, on that starting to build that trust with your with your buyers, with your customers, with your colleagues. And by sharing a little bit about yourself in a way that aligns and is relatable to your audience, right? At the end of the day, you want to make sure it's relatable to your audience as well. It makes you human and it builds that connection that is important in
Yeah. Brilliant. Sorry, I interrupted you. You were on a brilliant flow, but I just thought there are a couple of things there that I really wanted to pull out.
and
So
love
where were we? So we're talking about the before, during, and after. You were talking about know the product, continuously prospecting, preparation. We spent quite a lot of time talking about prep. And then, yeah, you're talking about this kind of this human element, I guess, which is what's threaded all the way through, and what we definitely bring into play in the during piece, because we're turning up with everything ready, everything
Yes.
sorted.
So let's talk about the during piece, right? Like the actual call itself. So we show up to these calls, we have all that first impression nailed, and we are being authentic. And then we build that rapport, we set the agenda, we do the intros, and then we focus on the actual conversation. And that conversation, when I talk about the human element, I'm not talking fluff. I'm talking about taking an outside-in perspective where you're having a business level conversation that your buyers care about. Because if we show up and throw up product, that is not the way to connect to the other person and show them that we are investing in you and learning about you and helping you achieve your objectives or address a problem that you're having. And so when we talk about a business level conversation, part of that preparation is to come in prepared to lead with the customer, to actively listen, to embrace silence and the power of pausing, which to me, it took me a while, right? To actually, I had to literally practice pausing and not jumping in, because that's what we do. We get excited, right? We listen to respond rather than listen to understand. And so that's part of that essential, the basics, because the problem is not that our buyers don't tell us, tell us information. The problem is us not being patient enough to hold down ourselves and let them get to the actual unpacking, right? Like in my early years, I would listen to my calls and they're talking, and I would jump in at that time when they were really going to say the good stuff, right? So embracing the silence, sharing insights. It's not just about asking questions. You're not a robot. You're not coming in. I think in the past, we used to have a list of questions and we're asking them. It's about asking the right question, actively listening to what they have to say, sharing insights. Our job is to add value in these conversations. And by sharing insights, we have to share with them something that they may not even thought about, or an example of a similar customer that had similar problems, or some trends that we are seeing, or even challenge their thoughts as well. Have you thought of that? Or here's what we're seeing, right? So that's kind of when I talk about that human element is not focusing on me, and my product, but really taking that outside in perspective and listening and then making time for these next steps. And also, Fred, qualifying out quickly, right? Like we sometimes sit in these meetings and because hope is a strategy, right? We're mostly optimistic folks, right? And we hear what we want to hear, those happy ears. And so however, we got to make sure that we're stepping back and saying, it's not the right opportunity. The best, someone told me, a sales leader told me, the best salespeople are those that qualified in quickly and qualified out quickly. And that's also making sure that you're active and listening, which is essential to sell.
It's funny, isn't it? Sales can be a bit counterintuitive at times. If you've not been trained in it, and this is where people make mistakes. They're not doing stuff deliberately badly, but they go in thinking, "Oh, I've got to do loads of talking. I've got to tell people how wonderful everything is, and I can sell to everyone, ice to Eskimos, blah 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 blah." And what you're saying there is actually no, sometimes not right, but let me point you in the right direction. And it's listen, it's don't talk.
It's things that are fundamental to building relationships, right? In any relationship you have, personal or professional, the act of connecting to that person by genuinely and being intensely curious about truly what is going on and how can we help you. And the act of reflecting when someone says something, or the act of summarizing or paraphrasing, or the act of having this pause where you're like, I hear you. Those are fundamentals. And I think we tend to think they're very fluff, but they're real. The top performers, you can see how great listeners they are.
Yeah. The other thing you're saying there, and yeah, I'm thinking about this stuff a lot. Well, you are as well. That's what we do. But the thing about the insights, the thing about turning up with something of a hypothesis and saying, I mean, to paraphrase, I reckon this is probably going on in your world. Now, maybe not as bluntly as that, but that's kind of what you're doing. That seems to me to be more important than ever now. Before you could ask questions and work it out on the trot. Now you've got to go with something pretty strong because of the time we've got and the distractions and everything. I don't know. I'd love your opinion on that. That's just kind of what I'm feeling now.
One thing that I would always say, and I'm soft when I'm doing resales calls, you got to not go in with assumptions, right? Because folks are get turned off when a rep comes in and they're assuming that, hey, this is the thing. And that's where the art of asking questions and bringing in that research, right? I understand that based on your reading your most earnings call transcript or your recent post or your recent hiring, that X, Y, and Z. This reminds me of our customers who are dealing with a similar challenge, and the root cause of that is X, Y, and Z. Tell me more. Are you experiencing that, or what are your thoughts about it? And that way, you're not coming in, because especially when you're selling to folks that are higher up, right? We got to make sure that we are coming in, not assuming, but also showing them enough of what we know and then getting their perspective. Collaboration is critical in sales. Sellers, we cannot come in and act like we know it all, because at the end of the day, we don't. And our customers have their own culture, their own strategies going on. And that's where that space for conversation and back and forth. And sometimes they will say, you know what, Rana, we're not going through that, but let me tell you what we're going through. So now I earned your trust and now you're opening up. So those are some of the things I agree with. You got to come in with some ideas, but the way you ask them and the way you engage with that person.
Are you saying I was a little bit too blunt in my example there? Yeah, I was. But that's why I would tend to use the word hypothesis, which is kind of a clever assumption. But absolutely, the way that you posit that, the way that you give that to kickstart the discussion. I mean, you said something again there where if you put the prep in, if you do the thinking, I don't think you can be wrong, because they're either going to go, wow, you have absolutely nailed it, or actually it's not that with us. Oh, really? Well, what is it then? Conversation's still going on. Well, you're more or less right, but there's actually something we do a little bit different. Happy days. We're still talking.
Happy days. Exactly. And this is something that a CEO also told me. He said, I don't want you coming in knowing everything, because you won't, right? But just showing me that you try is a way for me to say, okay, this is someone that is wanting to know about us, wanting to help us, and they've put the due diligence in.
Yeah. I chatted to C-level recently as well, and what they said is they love salespeople. So really? It says, well, yeah, because I know my problems from my point of view. So, but you can turn up and you can tell me from what your company sees them, but also what your customers see as well. So you can help me massively. So that's such a clever angle to take. We're seeing these things happen in the market. Oh, are you? Tell me more about it. That was really eye-opening for me, that one.
Well, Fred, I think absolutely. And this is what I tell sellers in my training. We are at a really, really great place to be in our profession, especially during uncertain times. Our buyers are looking at us and they want to know, like, are other people going through the same thing as we're going? What are you seeing right now? You're working with all of these customers. What are you seeing? And that's where that trusted advisor is a little crazy, because we've been told we want to be trusted advisor from the first day we get hired. It takes a while to be a trusted advisor, to have to follow processes. But that's what they're seeking, people that can help them in seeing things, because we see things differently. They're also seeking people that are also simplifying this chaos of information that they are receiving. When we have a sales call with our buyers, with our prospects, and we send them an email with 50 million case studies and 50 million assets, that's overwhelming. To me, you got to synthesize it and you got to simplify it, and you're going to provide them things that will help them in making the right decision for them. Because the worst thing you want to do as a rep is to have buyer's remorse. I don't want to land a deal where then the buyer goes, man, why did I hire Rana? I want to make sure that it's a win-win for both, because that's going to be an impact my expansion strategy, where that's where the most of the money is made. And it's also an opportunity cost if I end up landing the wrong deal, because now I'm not going after the right deals and I'm wasting time for both customer and myself in trying to convince the customer that they make the right decision.
Yeah. I always think about the trusted advisor thing. Yeah, it is a bit cliched, but and the customer decides. So it's like what you were just saying there is that they're almost like seeking to appoint somebody as their trusted advisor. They decide. And that, if you show you can simplify chaos, what an awesome expression. I'm borrowing that.
Because if we do that, man, how much we help our customers. And I think, sellers, we are very important to our economy. We are very important to businesses. We are the ones that are bringing in that, with the help, of course, of other colleagues, marketing, sales enablement, everyone else, product marketing. But we play a role, and we need to not forget that we're not just, the old cliche of being cheesy. No, we see at the table.
We definitely do. And I suppose the way I try to simplify the chaos of sales, if you want to put it that way, is that our job's to help people to think. Help them to think. If we can do that, yes, please come in. You're very welcome. I'll even buy the biscuits, talk to me, because you're helping me get my head around difficult stuff. We could stay talking during forever, but I do have an eye on the clock, and I know we probably want to talk about the after as well.
Yes. Yeah.
So
You want me to start?
please, yeah. What about the after, the essentials for after?
I mean, after a sales call, one of the things that you want to make sure after the sale is we're setting our team for success. This is where our job is to ensure that whoever is implementing, that they've been involved in that process, and that we're also building that trust with the customer, that once we hand off that deal for implementation or execution, that these people are also part of they will take care of them. And also roles and responsibility. What is your role as a rep when you hand off the deal to your teammates to execute on it? When are you getting involved? Because there is stress. Stress is formed. When I sell a deal, because sometimes it is a deal where we go through multiple decision makers, you form trust with your buyers. And so how are you helping your team build that trust with your customers by involving them early on and being part of the process, but also how are you also staying involved? I think it's companies are missing out if they just have the AE sell and remove them, because there's something called a human, again, trust and connection. And you want to make sure that the rep is involved in a way that is transparent and that doesn't also cause problems. So that's one thing. Another thing is debrief. Debrief your deals, man. Wins or losses. I won a deal one time and I thought I was so cool. I was like, I did everything right. I debriefed with my customer and I asked the question, what would have put the deal at risk? And they shared that with me. That was an eye opening. While I ended up winning the deal, there were some things that I could have, right? And so wins are also important to debrief wins, important to debrief losses, and also important to make sure that we are having these quarterly business reviews with our buyers, with our customers, and also connecting the dots for expansion opportunities and delivering on our promise, but also continuously adding value, right? Like our buyers don't know, sometimes you end up as a company acquiring other companies and adding to your solution portfolio, you're communicating that to your customers, your existing customers, and the value that you can provide them, then you're missing out. So how are you also connecting with your buyers? How are you also connecting to their business and ensuring that you are aligned and keeping an eye out of, wow, they're moving in that direction. Let's have a conversation. Let's have it and let's talk to them. So those are kind of some of the things that are after the sale.
Yeah. So I was smiling when you were talking about debrief, because I was thinking like the win-loss analysis, like, why do we win? Because I'm brilliant. Why do we lose? Everyone else's fault. We need a little bit more than that, don't we?
It's amazing when we win. We're like, we're done. We're done. No, man. Take a little bit of time to reflect. And I understand, I identify some lessons learned, but also some secret sauce, best practices that now you can scale into other deals.
Yeah. Business reviews, expansion. Oh, so much stuff. Sales is easy, isn't it? I mean, we're just talking the essentials here.
Essentials. But the thing is, if you think about the fundamentals of it, is connecting. It's reliability. It's character, your intent, your motives. You can be a great following all that process, but if your character, if one's character is questioned in terms of their intent or motives, that can impact your career, right? So there are fundamental things that are been part of human connection, human relationships that we need to remind ourselves.
Well, I mean, that famous trust equation. I mean, as you said, trust is at the core of all of this. I think you've said the word about 3 or 4 times, probably a little bit more.
Loss, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the equation, what is it? It's credibility plus reliability plus intimacy. So being safe with people's information, but divided by self-orientation. So if you're doing all that stuff, but only for your own benefit, basically, that erodes trust. When you're doing all those things because you genuinely care about the other party, you want the best for them. That's your trust builder. And that's the stuff you can't fake. And that's the stuff which people can read, they get, our senses pick on this, don't they?
They do. And there's a power of also saying, I don't know. Like, why are we afraid of, no, you can't say, I don't know for every question they ask, this flexibility. But there's also a power of pausing and saying, you know what, great question. I don't know it, but I'm going to get you an answer by the end of the day and really deliver on that. That's reliability. And that also being human. And also when you think about trust and in your customers, I don't know about you, but my customers take me with them, right? Because there's a level of trust that has been formed. And it's not just about your character. It's also about your competency that deliver, right? You got a results-oriented credibility, reliability. And so that's where you also, as you grow your career, you got to think of those factors.
Yeah. And that's all genuine, real, reputational stuff. Yeah, you can post all you want and build the personal brand and all that kind of stuff, but I don't know. Maybe I'm a bit old-fashioned, but for me, the personal brand really it's your reputation. That's the stuff that we want to be working on, I would say. But I could be old-fashioned. Who knows?
No, I think you got it. You're presenting yourself as a human being. You're selling to someone. You also want to work for a company that also has a good reputation. Like and that you also believe in their product and their solution. And I talk about it in my book about, if you're struggling with selling a product, you got to unpack it and understand, well, why isn't? Is it your own biases that you're painting that picture because you're losing deals and you're blaming it on price or the product is not good? Or is there something real about why you're not selling it? And also, is there something that you don't agree with the ethos of the organization or how they treat or their business model? These are things that you got to also look at as a seller, because when we're selling something, we're also putting our name on it. Even if you work for another company, they bought from you, right? And so you have to believe in it. And also one thing that I also will tell your audience, your customers want to know if applicable, are you using your own product to solve similar problems, right? If you're not drinking your own Kool-Aid, how are you going to convince, right? If I come into a meeting and I'm telling you, Fred, your sellers needs to prepare yourself, and I haven't done my own preparation, that's going to impact your buyer, right? So really being also practicing what we tell our buyers and using our tools, if applicable. Again, if it's not, but if applicable, use it and tell that story.
Oh, storytelling, whole new.
No,
No, please. I think you need to. We're just at the essentials. I'm expecting the next book. Well, back in the days I did the course, it was the essentials for success, and that was a 3-day course that we ran twice a month, I think it was. And then there's the follow-on course, which was developing your sales experience, which people would come on about a year after doing the first course. So yeah, the book too. But no, I think we definitely need to have a chat again, because time has just flown. I mean, the time has just gone, and you shared a ton with us.
Thank you.
Good news is it's all in the book. So I will put a link to, well, what's the best link to put for you in the show notes?
Oh, very kind of you to ask. My LinkedIn profile,
Okay.
and send you that, and people can connect with me. Just mention Fred's podcast so I can link to that as well. And also they can go, of course, on Amazon and buy the book Sales Essentials. And let me know what you all think. This book was written by a seller, myself, and it has a lot of also stories that I've incorporated along with research, and people are relating, and I love that. I love that.
Brilliant. Well, we'll pop links to both of those into the show notes. And well, thank you so much for coming on and sharing so much with us. It was really
Thank
fun
you.
to talk.
Our sun came out, and so the bright light for your show. It's a sign.
Oh, awesome. The sun shines on the Sales Today podcast.
Thank you, Brett, for having me.
Pleasure. Thank you for listening to the Sales Today podcast with me, your host, Fred Copestake. I hope you've enjoyed what you heard today. If you did, please get in touch and hit subscribe. And remember, you can take the collaborative selling scorecard for free to check out how your sales approach works in today's environment. You'll find it in the show notes.